Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Be sure to join our network and get involved in the work that we are doing. If you can, please like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, which serves as a platform to communicate with our members. This video is part of our 2025 annual conference. We're looking for folks to be on the conference planning committee. Please email info@housingoregon.org.
We'll get started, and I'll start off with some introductions with myself and our program team that's here. So my name is Blake Burrell. I'm a co-executive director at Community Supported Shelters, which is a shelter program and social service nonprofit in Eugene, Oregon. This is Danny Rajek. Danny is our community manager. So in the context of our organization, she is our person that leads shelter operations and programming and a variety of different things at our organization. And then this is my wonderful co-executive director, Heather Kwasanza. And this team is amazing. These two women are just fabulous people, and the presentation that I'm going to give is really highlighting efforts of all of our work, and they'll be helping with going through the group activity at the end and kind of walking around and sharing perspective, and then during the Q&A. But I'll be doing a bulk of the presentation today, so welcome. So our presentation today is reducing recidivism through shelter. And it's community supported shelters and the community court's collaborative approach to public safety. So before I dive into our presentation, I'd love like a show of hands, and I'm a little interactive, and I just had a lot of coffee, so I'm gonna like keep everyone awake because I know it's 9 a.m. Folks, how many of you have been to the city of Eugene or know where that's at? How many of you live and work in Eugene? How many of you know about the city of Eugene's community court? Yeah? Okay. How many of you know about community supported shelters? Yeah, we got some fans. Okay, awesome. So I think what's really fun about today is that we get to highlight a really unique program partnership that we've established with the City of Eugene's Community Court, which we'll talk a little bit about what they do, but really our city has a lot of different service providers, this really broad network of nonprofits. The context of our jurisdiction is that we have a crisis of homelessness and housing. We have on any given night between 4,000 and 5,000 folks that are unsheltered, experiencing homelessness, anywhere between 1,000 to 1,500 individuals in our various shelter programs. So we represent one shelter program and a broad network of shelters in the city of Eugene, and we collaborate with a lot of municipal entities, whether that's outreach contracts, shelter programs, more unique housing prevention programs, things of that nature. Um, and really, we're in this big network of people who are identifying that there's a lot of need in the city of Eugene, and there's a lot of folks that need those additional support, shelter being one of the essential resources that we focus on. So what we get to talk about today is how our organization built this bridge into our local criminal justice system and identified that shelter is an essential resource for folks who are navigating the demands of the criminal justice system and navigating the various policies and ordinances and different political landscape in our community that's associated with homelessness. So our agenda today is talking a little bit about what who community supported shelters is. You're looking at the team that is responding 24/7 to incidents and needs, taking care of folks right here at this table. So it's a great group of folks to learn who we are. I'll talk a little bit about what our program model is. So we operate what's called a safe spot community. So it's a non-congregate shelter program that's going to spread throughout the entire city. There's some nuances into how we operate it, but I'll talk a little bit about just what that model is and how we do it, knowing that there's a lot of different models that are similar, that use various shelter modalities that you might have exposure to, or you might say, hey, I think this could work in my community. It's really interesting. And I'll tell you just a little bit about how we do it. Then we'll really dive into this partnership with the community court. And I'm a little nerdy, so I will tell you about it, and then I'm going to throw some stats at you, but hopefully I don't overwhelm you with like program outcomes, things like that. For folks in the audience that read CAPER reports and HUD's canned reports, I'm sure you do not want me to read a CAPER to you this morning. But if you do, follow up. I can show you all kinds of cool stuff. And then at the end, I really just want us to connect in our tables. And I'm going to make you all talk to each other if you're comfortable with it. But really think about how the information that I share in this presentation could relay to your local community, and think about things that you might take away from a presentation like this with a sheltering organization that said, hey, I identified this gap and we built this bridge. Is there something in your world that you can do to build that bridge to support participants, to support folks that might be experiencing homelessness in your community? So we'll start off with a little bit about what is community supported shelters, who are we? So our mission is community supported shelters helps the unhoused rebuild their lives through intentional community. Um, so our organization started in 2013 as a very small grassroots organization led by a group of folks who identified the need for immediate emergency shelter, and they created a very unique modality of shelter. We're exploring with a lot of different alternative building materials, and for folks that really are interested in like construction, there was a lot of like, do we want to do Kwanzaa huts? Do we want to do, little domic geodesic dome structures? Do we want to do something on wheels? Do we want to do some? There's a lot of this early dialogue and innovation that was happening with our founders, with the immediate goal to shelter a family member who was living unsheltered, and to build bridges into the faith community, to identify a place that would allow us to use the land, to place a unit, and to then address more broad concerns around homelessness. We started having questions asked. Hey, that little hut thing that you built was really interesting. How'd you do that? We'd be interested in doing that on our property. We want to make more. We want to, and eventually evolved into what is now a pretty large social service organization and sheltering nonprofit in the community. So we started as 4 safe spot communities, and a safe spot community is anywhere between 2 and 20 Conestoga huts. And don't worry, I'll tell you what those are. But you can see in here, we have what's called a Conestoga hut. It's a non-congregate shelter modality that mirrors the Conestoga wagons. And in the city of Eugene, they're actually under ordinance as vehicles. In the county, we're called alternative shelter, and at the state, we're somewhere between alternative shelter and urban campsite. There's some recent regulatory changes. So we live in this very interesting blend of shelter definitions, but what it is a 60 square foot room with a locking door, a storage container, a hard shell roof that you can call your own. We operate 14 safe spot communities and about 170 Conestoga huts in the city of Eugene. So those communities have a lot of different functions and forms. We have affinity-based program models. We have unique program partnerships, and then we have a general waiting list. But really, we're seeing how we can utilize this shelter modality as a mechanism that's both dignified for individuals, having a lot of autonomy, being able to come and go as you please, maintaining a basic agreement that mirrors a tenancy agreement, and being able to access your Conestoga hut regardless of the time of day, in a low barrier capacity, in a way that you have a lot of institutional supports to maintain your unit, and a program team that's going to come out and help you maintain those relationships with community members that you might be living with. So in any given year, we have 230 shelter participants. We have a housing navigation program. Does a lot of work to help people use the Conestoga huts as a place to stabilize and then a stepping stone for rapid rehousing, PSH, transitional housing, recovery housing, and then sometimes private sector housing opportunities. We live in market scarcity in the city of Eugene, so helping folks navigate through those systems and identify positive outcomes is a really big goal of ours. So we do that work through our service navigation program, and it all starts with our outreach office and our access center. So we have a day services center in the city of Eugene. Last year we served about 750 people. So we're looking at, on any given year, 700 to 750 folks who are unsheltered, coming in, accessing day services on an ongoing basis. And that varies everything from just coming in to check in, to getting hygiene supplies, to, hey, I'm in crisis right now and I need support. We offer case care management services, so folks may come in and say, I'm getting evicted, or I have this voucher, I don't know what to do with it, can you help me get an extension? Or we see folks with really complex behavioral and mental health needs, and we're working with our county partners to identify appropriate placements and more supportive environments. And we do a lot of work with case conferencing and interagency case conferencing, especially to identify those placements for folks that are extremely vulnerable in the city of Eugene. So I think one of the big pieces to highlight about community supported shelters is that we have a really diverse team, and lived experience is the driving factor in our decision making. Our organization was founded by people who are unhoused. It is operated by people who are unhoused, and we have a blended team of folks who are actively experiencing homelessness and folks who are housed in our community, taking on different roles in our organization. Right now, the majority of our staff have self-disclosed lived experience of homelessness or being at risk of homelessness. 22% of our staff have lived in our safe spot communities. So last year, a fifth of our company has lived in a safe spot community, and 17 team members enrolled as workforce development participants are gaining employment experiences with community supported shelters. So we are a sheltering organization that is run by people who live in our shelters, and those folks are really guiding how safe spot communities are governed and managed, and contributing to everything from running our day access center to being case managers to being managers, up to being a board member. So we have a lot of engagement at all levels of our organization. And I really emphasize that people with lived experience are decision makers at our organization. They are participating in a meaningful way, making meaningful decisions, and guiding those decisions and the support for our clients through a peer-driven lens. And that is at the core of what we do and how we approach safe spot communities. We view this as a collaboration with people that are living in communities. We play a role in maintaining the infrastructure, garnering access to funding and resources. But when it comes to operating safe spot communities, this is a really unique partnership with folks who are unhoused, having autonomy and control over the spaces that they live. And I think that that's just a really valuable dimension of what we do. So the Safe Spot Community Program is what we call our shelter program. So we don't traditionally say we operate, a homeless shelter or a non-congregate shelter unless we're writing a grant application. We're saying we run a safe spot community, but for folks that might say, hey, what do you mean by safe spot program model? That's language that's foreign to me. We'll go through a couple definitions that really apply to this model. So we operate a low barrier shelter that uses a housing focused model, centering to stabilize for positive outcomes. So when we define low barrier, we understand that this varies greatly. We're talking about a program that is very inclusive. We do not screen out for criminal background. We take a variety of abilities. We're working with folks regardless of their income, sobriety, criminal histories. This is a program where we're saying if you come, you engage, you get on our waiting list, and you get to the top, you're moving in. And then we're going to do a lot of work and focus on shelter retention, making sure to stabilize you in that environment. If some of those barriers that might traditionally screen you out of non-congregate or village models come up, we're going to say, hey, how do we work with you to get you an on-ramp and stabilize in the setting, learn how to live with folks, learn how to stay in compliance with some of our expectations. But we're really focused on producing low barrier environments for folks to live in. So whenever someone's moving in to our setting, you know what I said, it's a low barrier non-congregate shelter. We have a orientation program where folks are going through this period of stabilization. They are getting to know our organization, accessing day services, outreach services. We're getting their housing journey started on day one. We offer coordinated entry assessments, case care management, while they're on the waiting list, so that whenever they get into the shelter program, they're already working and chipping away on housing and health-related goals. And then coming in, a lot of what we're talking about is how do we live with our neighbors, right? If anyone has ever had roommates, how many folks live with other people, have roommates? It could be a spouse, it could be a friend. Okay. Like cleaning the dishes. You know, how do we talk about that little frustrating thing? Or we're playing music until 9 p.m. and now it's 10 p.m. and I have work in the morning. How do we talk to our neighbor about that? How do we, take care of each other in resource scarcity? Who in this community has a car? Who in this community has access to financial resources? Can we go to a food pantry in our community and bring that and stock the community fridge? These are the types of conversations and dialogues we're having to really promote a pro-social environment and, a interdependence on each other, not necessarily a dependence on our organization for those types of resources. I think that producing that communal environment is really essential to what we're doing. And we've been talking a lot about how our Safe Spot community model is something that can translate to other places in our state, in our country. We have a lot of inquiries in our consulting team from people out of state who see the safe spots, they're interested. And we brought this into the Oregon legislature this year with the city of Eugene. So for folks that are involved in policy discussions, House Bill 3644 was a really big deal for us because it looked and said, this model that you're doing, this non-congregate, freestanding structure, this has efficacy, we're going to allow this, we're going to fund this. Our organization scaled during the pandemic. We were a really unique option for cities who are looking for non-congregate options that promoted social distancing. And we were selected as one of Eugene's primary, non-congregate models because of that. But as folks know, is that ARPA funding, a lot of that CARES funding, a lot of those pandemic era funding programs are going away. So it was really important for us to get into the state level policy, be included in the funding landscape, and this bill is what does it for us. So if you're in the state of Oregon and you're saying, hey, this looks really interesting, that safe temporary emergency placement site is what they call the Safe Spot community model at a state level. And it's been a lot of energy and a lot of effort. I know our team, Heather and I went to DC last year. We've been to Salem. We've chatted about things. Danny's been involved in advocacy efforts. It's been a lot of work just to make sure that people know we exist, that policymakers know that this has efficacy, and that we don't get excluded from a funding landscape. So if you're thinking about this step model, one of the primary pieces of what we do is we do use a housing-focused approach. So housing focus is very similar to housing first, but in the context of our organization, we acknowledge that we are a shelter. We are working on getting folks into housing, but they're coming to shelter first. We're having housing-focused dialogues about how do we stabilize and put housing at the forefront of our conversations, our case management goals, if that's a goal you identify. And I think that that's a really important context for us, is that we do have folks that come into our program that, housing isn't the goal, and we're not pushing them into this model of living if that's not what they want to do. We're saying, how do we stabilize you, identify goals in a really holistic way, And if housing is at the forefront for you, that's fabulous. If it's not, we can put that on the table, but that might not be the thing we focus on right now. We do find a lot of individuals aspire towards housing. A majority of folks do. But for folks that don't, we just are having these housing-focused dialogues, really emphasizing that everything that we're doing is to build our skills to reduce barriers for housing attainment in the future, if that's what we decide that we want to do. So our services as a shelter provider and outreach agency, we have basic needs, which is laundry, shower, clothing closet, survival supplies, shuttle services. Shelter, we have our alternative shelter. Each safe spot community has solar charging stations, electric access. We do a supplemental nutrition program. They have community kitchens where folks can cook and take care of those spaces. We do outreach services. So if you saw on that first slide where it says we have 800 events and outreach meetings a year, these are community project parties and outreach meetings. Danny gets to coordinate the logistics of that. We have 12 outreach meetings a week across our Safe Spot communities. They're all 2 hours. And so we have teams of program staff going out and spending time in our community, organizing everyone that lives in our community to talk about how we're living together, what our goals are, what types of unique programming opportunities are available at our organization, and then coordinating any case care management services or transportation needs to access those services. And then we have crisis response, where we do have folks that have a variety of behavioral health needs. We have folks that have substance use disorder, so making sure that folks are supplied with harm reduction supplies, the resources they need to intervene in an overdose or any types of situations that might occur in the communities. Then we have social services, so we have community programming, which I love community programming. We went on a waterfall tour like 2 weeks ago, took a shuttle out and picked up everyone. We had 25 shelter participants out in the woods looking at the waterfalls. We're going on a fishing event this Friday, and we're going to go out. Anyone knows the Mackenzie River? We're going out and going trout fishing in the Mackenzie River, and we're going to get 30 people there, and I don't know how, but we're going to figure it out. But it's just fun. We have these really unique programming opportunities where our goal is really to build community and to create those third spaces in our community. This is everything from guitar lessons to art studio to going to an event. We really focus a lot on that community involvement dimension of social determinants of health to make sure that folks have opportunities to integrate into the community active spaces that they might be historically excluded from. Service navigation program, which is focused on a holistic model, case care services, anything from mental health, healthcare, housing, criminal expungement, eviction expungement. We kind of do it all. We have a really talented team, and we explore anything that might reduce barriers for folks and identify those goals. Information and referral, we do receive mail, receiving mail for probably about 300 people at any given time, then harm reduction supports. So our organization, I like to think for an audience that you might not have ever seen our model before, this on-ramp of stabilization is, I think, something that is a really good way to kind of visualize the program model. We're often starting with one individual who's living in a place not meant for human habitation, coming to our office saying, I need services, I have immediate needs that I need to address. Those usually relate to hygiene, crisis intervention, immediate housing supports, and stabilization. In the wintertime, our front office becomes a space to come and drink coffee and to warm up, to dry off. And our day respite area is a place to be in the afternoon, because in our community, there are just simply not a lot of places you are allowed to be if you are unsheltered. So we talk a lot about creating these safe spaces for folks to be, and then layering on services that support them, build institutional trust. We do ID and phone assistance, and then any additional housing supports that folks identify while they're on the wait list. After they move in, they get a set of keys, access to our community resources, solar charging, um, immediate supports often related to healthcare, mental health care. We make sure folks are enrolled, primary care, insurance, triaging whatever they qualify for. Then after we get through that stabilization, we start talking about self-actualization. What are your goals that you've identified? Does this relate to employment, healthcare, housing, behavioral health? And can we do this in a community? And you'll see the little people heads go from one person to all these people, right? And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to build community from one individual coming in to saying, you know, I know 20, 30 people. I've lived in a couple of safe spot communities. I know all these staff. I'm not alone. And being in community, not being alone, is so essential to who we are as humans. And people who are coming in who just feel like, I don't have anyone who knows me. I don't have anyone that I can rely on, that I can call on. Just someone being acknowledged when they come in the office and, hey, Joe, it's really good to see you. Haven't seen you in a couple weeks. Hey, Sarah, it's really good to see you. How have you been? Those are services that we offer. Just acknowledgement, care, and compassion, recognizing someone's existence during really, really challenging times. And as you live in the safe spot communities, we talked about it. We're not there to make best friends. You're not going to love everyone you live with. We've all had bad roommates, but you at least know that person. And often, even if you're in conflict with them, you can rely on them for certain things. And often, folks are at least polite and giving care. And then you get roped into the programming and the team. And you have folks that move out of our safe spot communities that keep coming back. They come to our aftercare program. They come to different programming opportunities. Our waterfall tool that I talked about, that was a previous shelter participant. He's housed. He reached out to our program coordinator and he said, I want to take everyone on a waterfall tour. I've been geeking out about geology this year. And so he led the tour. And I think that that is like the type of thing that we're able to do when we build community. It's not about just coming here to get housed. It's about coming here to build a network of people and not be alone and navigating the experience of homelessness alone in the city of Eugene. We emphasize a lot of different positive outcomes. These are some fabulous people. Seeing their pictures makes me really smile. And we do a lot of work to make sure that folks that do get housing get stable supports and access for retaining that housing after they get there. So that's a lot about us. And I'm going to now talk about our bridge into the criminal justice system and our partnerships with the community court. So the city of Eugene has a large provider community and has some pretty intensive needs associated with addressing unsheltered homelessness in the community. The city has taken a traditional city management approach, a lot of clearance events, a lot of prohibitive ordinances surrounding camping and different acts of survival in the city. And the municipal court identified that they needed to create specialty dockets associated with different statuses in the community. So for folks that have worked with justice-involved individuals or in the criminal justice system, they have a 360 docket, a mental health court, drug court, and community court. And there's a couple other more specialized dockets, but the community court is predominantly focused on resource-scarce individuals that become justice-involved, often around minor misdemeanor offenses, and those minor misdemeanor offenses are often associated with the experience of homelessness. So they opened a provider room, and this has been a really big project. Their Central Services Division operates this in conjunction with the community court or with the municipal court. This provider room, the goal is bringing in providers from a lot of different agencies into one spot once a week on the same day that folks that have those minor misdemeanor charges are coming to appear for court. They are actually coming into a room full of service providers. You've got housing agencies, social service agencies, street outreach, healthcare, mental health care. A lot of the organizations that are on the case plan are actually required to be at the provider room. So that means that folks who are trying to actuate on the case plan aren't trying to navigate everywhere, all in town, oh, I got to go to this and go to this and go to, you can come to the provider room, you can often connect and at least communicate with the agency, sometimes actually get those case planning goals done in that space, or coordinate needs like bus passes, transportation, or saying, hey, I simply can't make it this week. So the provider room is a really unique resource in our community. We got involved in it early on. I've been at multiple organizations that have been involved in the provider room. Um, and that relationship that we built was kind of a foundation for exploring how we could partner with them. So the community court, when we're really thinking of it, think of this as this justice proximal program that is focused on a very specific demographic of people with a very specific set of charges who are identified as needing different social service supports. And so if you opt into the community court program, you have the ability to not get fines, to not give civil penalties, to do a completion, graduate from that program, and not be subject to all the punitive measures associated with those minor misdemeanor charges, and hopefully getting plugged into different social service resources. So when we think about those offenses, disorderly conduct, interfering with public transportation, criminal mischief, prohibited noise, theft, prohibited camping, criminal trespass, and park rule violations. And there's a few more, but those are most of what we see on a weekly basis. Went back in time for a second there. So this is one of our program staff working with the court case manager. We have a table in the provider room. We're there every week on Wednesday, and we're doing intakes, FDAs, a variety of social service resources for participants that are working with us, as well as signing folks up for a general wait list at our shelter program. So as we were in this space, we identified, there's a lot of need. We have a very unique set of resources, and we're serving demographics that are coming into this room. And we asked ourselves, what can we do as a shelter provider? Well, if we look at that list of eligible offenses, there's a couple things we have a lot of experience with. And that is working with folks who have prohibited camping citations, folks who have criminal trespass 1 and 2, folks that have park rule violations. Actually, a majority of the people who come into our office who are unsheltered have a laundry list of these. Civil penalties, fines. They've tried to go through the community court process. It's been challenging. They haven't had the supports they need. They don't know what their credit looks like. They don't know what civil penalties they have. They just know that they wake up and they get these tickets on their tent or a posting in front. They're asking us, where can I go that I am not going to get a citation? How long can I be there? They're trying to navigate ordinances and rules. These things live in they live in code. They live in a PDF on the city's website. They change. There's not a lot of communication between policymakers and the unhoused community. So someone can think that, hey, I'm allowed to sleep in a public way and I'm not going to get a citation for a couple of days. And when that changes and the policy or ordinance changes in the city of Eugene, most notably about 2 years ago, there were increased measures to reduce people's proximity to educational institutions and waterways. A lot of people didn't know that. Waterways are really commonplace for folks that have forest encampments. And so you had a bunch of people who are used to living on the Willamette River there in our parks and open spaces that, they got their camps cleared. They lost a lot of resources. They got citations where historically that was a space that they were allowed to exist. So we have a lot of exposure to helping individuals who are justice involved because of these prohibited ordinances and punitive measures that the city of Eugene has decided to implement. So we said, well, what if we address the needs of the court participants that become justice involved with shelter and support? So for someone who is unsheltered, receiving citations associated with their unsheltered status, if we provide shelter, maybe we'll see a reduction of those types of citations and fines. So we had a community that we've operated for about a decade. It's a Roosevelt Safe Spot, centrally located, accessible to the community court. We went through a process of talking to the community court, doing the development work. I mean, this is like 4 or 5 years in the making. This organization, we've had dialogues for a half decade, right? Um, and we said, well, why don't we just dedicate Roosevelt to community court participants? And you'll have a whole safe spot community for folks that are involved with the community court. Let's see if we can make this safe spot community about creating a cohort of people, a place for a cohort of people who are all justice involved, trying to navigate this, and having a space to do that together. Um, it is more complicated than it sounds, and we're going to talk about that. So our goals with the community court were to increase access to essential services and shelter to stabilize unsheltered individuals, coordinate with community partners to promote positive outcomes, and provide shelter services in order to reduce risk of recidivism for minor misdemeanors. So our original partners that we identified are the City of Eugene Community Court, Community Supported Shelters as the shelter provider, and then Laurel Hill Center providing some of the more intensive case management, housing navigation related services. This kind of trifecta of resources both supports this need for immediate shelter, supports folks who have behavioral health needs, who also may be involved in mental health court, and then the community court, which is a combination of programming staff, provider room, a dedicated court case manager, but all working together to have this communication and interagency case conferencing around just this cohort of about 16 people at the Roosevelt community. So we were contracted for sheltering services. We facilitate the court-sanctioned restoration hours in the community. So folks that have court-sanctioned hours can get credit for doing their court-sanctioned hours by cleaning the kitchen, contributing to their garden project, tidying up the community in which they live. Case management and planning and referral, so some specialized case management work in our housing navigation, and then court communications and administration. So our organization focused on doing that with a hypothesis that shelter will likely reduce the likelihood of recidivism for minor misdemeanors. Increased access to services would promote engagement with the community court, increase access to the client for the court itself, and defendants will have high rates of shelter retention under the safe spot model. And we attribute that largely to the communal model, promoting self-sufficiency and a reduced institutional context. The fact that we're not there 24/7 with staff on site and it's not hyper-monitored feels a lot like a social environment, like an encampment, where a lot of folks are coming from. So it's creating a cohort in a new space with access to more resources, and the court having more access to us, the ultimate goal of reducing recidivism. So we opened the Roosevelt community up to court participants in 2024. So over 2024, we had 37 folks. A majority were male. A majority were 27. So we had 27 participants, the age of 25 to 44, 9 ages 45 to 64. A majority of folks had a mental health disorder. So we had 72% had mental health disorders, 32% had a drug use disorder, 38 had a drug and alcohol use disorder, 33% had developmental disabilities, and 47% had physical disabilities, and 72% had a history of DV, sexual assault, or human trafficking. And of that group of 37 folks, 91% of them were coming from an unsheltered condition. So we are talking about a lot of protected class statuses, a lot of people who are in historically marginalized communities, who are justice involved, who have a lot of barriers to maintaining court case plans. Just the sheer intersection of disability status and the history of violence, sexual violence and DV, was something that we as an organization, we knew that was going to be represented in the demographic. We learned a lot about just how much that group, those demographics of people in this unique intersection with homelessness are impacted by those histories, and then how getting involved in the criminal justice system because of the experience of unsheltered homelessness, how that impacts people's sense of institutional trust, their sense of belonging in our community. So we've done a lot of work to plug folks in and build our repository of affinity-based programs and resource referrals, because we found out that our network needed to be much broader to support participants moving in. So when we look at outcomes associated with this program, so of 20 participants that left during that year, so we had 37 throughout all of 2024, 20 people left during that. So folks they live there for 6 months. They have a couple options after 6 months of living there. So we had 26% were voluntary departures, 15% exited into an unsheltered condition, 10% went to emergency shelter, and then 47% transferred to another one of our safe spot communities. So when folks hit that 6 months in the Roosevelt safe spot, we have conversations about what's our next steps, and often folks are saying, hey, can you plug me into another emergency shelter, or can I transfer to another safe spot? I've liked my stay here. I want to continue working with your organization. And so folks identify that goal. We retain them across one of our other 13 properties. So when we talk about this, our hypothesis that shelter would reduce recidivism. So while folks were living in the Roosevelt Safe Spot community, 0% had a new citation with minor misdemeanors in 2024. Whenever folks left the safe spot communities, so not that cohort of folks that moved in, so we had about 60% of people are either in our shelter or another shelter. This 17% are for folks that left their shelter stay, weren't sheltering, and whenever the shelter resource went away, 17% of folks ended up going and getting another citation. So that was about 4 people. 3 of the 4 got new citations after their shelter stay. Of that 20 that left, that 17% comes from that. I think just these numbers, especially that number 0, just really sticks out. You provide the resource. You say, this condition of getting a citation and a fine is a byproduct of a policy decision and a lack of a resource. And if you provide the resource, the criminal and civil penalties go away. The pressure on the criminal justice system is significantly reduced. And this is 1 year. We'll run our numbers this year. We've had a couple participants that have gotten citations, disorderly conduct, a noise issue. But a majority of our folks, if you have the sheltering resource, those 3 minor misdemeanors that we circled don't happen anymore because folks have a place to be. And I think that this just really shows the efficacy of that housing-focused model. It mirrors a lot of the philosophy around housing first, indicating that if you provide the resource, the recidivism doesn't happen, and we saw that. Folks are stabilized to have an institutional context to get support. They're less likely to be justice involved. So 70% of individuals transferred to the standard safe spot communities and are still in the safe spot community program with us. Shelter was retained regardless of a successful completion of the court case plan. So for folks that were revoked, didn't meet the expectations of the court case plan, most of them are maintaining shelter compliance and compliance with all their program agreements with us, still sheltering with us and engaged. Shelter participants sustained engagement in the program, and they're coming for pre-employment experiences, they're getting navigation, they're coming on field trips, going to the art studio. So folks that get plugged into the institutional context, stay in the institutional context, build community with us, stay actively engaged and meaningful members of our organization. And then for the folks that were exited to an unsheltered condition due to safety concerns and program noncompliance, one of those folks re-enrolled in the street outreach program. 2 of those folks enrolled in the day services program. One of those individuals got past their ban period. They're back living in our safe spot community, going round 2, seeing if we can stay in compliance with the rules and expectations. So people that are engaging with us are staying engaged with us. People who were asked to leave still are coming and accessing services with us, building institutional trust within the context of our organization. Judge Gill, who's the individual who presides over most of the court proceedings for our population, said by addressing the significant underlying needs, the court and CSS get to step one step closer to reducing recidivism and improving the community's quality of life. And I think that's a pretty positive reflection for someone who's never worked in the context of shelter, someone who's justice involved, saying, you know, I'm presiding over these cases and I'm seeing the stabilization happen. I'm seeing the reduced rates of recidivism. Our goals and our hypotheses were correct. It's working, which is great. It makes Danny and I feel really good because we're putting a lot of energy into the day-to-day operations of the site, and just knowing that our court partners are also satisfied and feeling like we're doing our due diligence and they're seeing outcomes that they also desired has been really exciting. So, heard all the good stuff, a little bit about our program outcomes. I just want to share a couple of challenges that have presented themselves so that y'all can think about if you're saying, wow, this is really interesting. I found what Blake was talking about to be really compelling. Or you might be saying, like, I need a cup of coffee. It sounds interesting. I'm watching a YouTube video later. Whatever it is, I want to also acknowledge that there's some challenges in doing this. And creating a new cohort and an adaptive program model has been a challenge for us, and there's ongoing lessons that we learn when we pilot programs. So for our participants, our biggest challenges have been stabilization, coming into a new communal context that has a higher rate of churn because folks are leaving within 6 months, new neighbors, folks that you might know from the court, people you might not like from the court that you're going and you're seeing, or you might not be living in the same shared arrangements out in the community, and you know that guy from around town, but now you live together, and that can cause a lot of communal conflict. Behavioral health access, just having consistent engagement with crisis workers, mental health supports, and behavioral health supports in community. We have capacity at our organization. We don't employ qualified mental health care professionals. So we have a lot of folks that are peer supports, community health workers, have significant histories in crisis response. But we see like a very high demand for some of the behavioral health related needs for acute traumas that folks are coming in with. Transportation and phones is just, when you're talking about keeping on top of a court case plan and you've now been given, you're on a docket, you've got this person telling you to do this thing, this person, you've got a schedule, you've got, you know, you're not only just managing your daily needs of survival, but now you've got a public defender to call and a court case manager that wants to see you every Wednesday and a mental health appointment across town. We're seeing just that need for being able to call people, being able to get transportation from place to place. Establishing institutional trust, which has been a unique piece for us. The institutional relationship with us is new. So, and we have now, our agency has proximity to the criminal justice system. So sussing out, can I really trust these people? They go to staffing meetings with the police. They go to staffing meetings with the court. Like, can I really trust CSS? And building that trust to our organization takes more time than it does in the traditional Safe Spot community model. They're navigating communication with multiple agencies and legal personnel, a lot of different types of conversations with a lot of different types of people. And then they're still living in this housing scarce and resource scarce environment in the city of Eugene. And those problems do not go away because you got a hut. And it's not like a, hey, you got a hut and in 6 months you're gonna get housed. It's a, hey, you got a hut and we're gonna get you on a wait list for public sector housing, and that's gonna take 2 years. And I think really for our participants, they know that that's a deep frustration. These individuals have been navigating this context for a long time. What's been really unique is how aware now those legal and criminal justice staff members at the community court are really seeing, oh wow, you can provide the shelter resource and it's still gonna take 2 years. And I think that there's been a lot of kind of empathy building with the participants and different folks whether it's the defense or the prosecutor or even some of the muni judges that are involved in that project. Um, I think an important part to identify for them as well is that we had to change our program model. So I showed you that ramp of stabilization in the traditional safe spots. Folks are coming in at a different point of entry. And so all of that stabilization and institutional trust that happens on that first half of that triangle there, um, you're meeting now right in the middle. You got access to the sheltering resource, but like all that stabilization hasn't happened. I don't know where CSS's main office is. I don't have my ID. I don't have a cell phone, and I have this court case plan, and now I'm living in this new context. And so it can just be really disorienting. Like Wednesday move-in day is a big day. And it's essential to getting folks moved in so they can stabilize and move forward, and get into that context if we're really going to bring them into the program and do it right. But if you think about that experience as a person, I got a citation last week at a negative police interaction. They told me I have to show up to court. I show up to court. I opt into community court. They say, hey, based off your housing status, you're eligible for a hut. So I say, of course I want shelter. Then I get there, I do the intake, I make an appearance, I do a bunch of paperwork with CSS, they move me in, and now I live in a hut. Wow, this has been a crazy week and a half. Like, that's the on-ramp that is happening. And like, that on-ramp traditionally takes 6 to 8 months, right? And so when you're really thinking about just the expedited process of accessing this resource, and then for our agency, we're getting to know you. Oh, who are you? Welcome. This is your new neighbor. This is this resource. This is this. This is when we have community meeting. We're getting to know people, but we're all new to each other. And it's just this kind of constant process for folks living in that community, which is very different. So for our organization, it's a different program model. We have direct referrals on a wait list. There's a lot of behavioral health need. We had to shift our focus from helping folks attain housing to just retaining shelter. We're operating in an environment with diminished institutional trust. So a community facilitator or a shelter manager who's used to having, like people are really excited, we've met you, we know your name. You got people who are a little bit suspect of you, at a distance, and that it takes some time to build that because a lot of people have acute traumas, negative experiences with the criminal justice department and law enforcement, and we talk to them now. We have a diverse network of key stakeholders. So we went from talking to our little trio there to a really broad network of people, and we have limited personnel resources. Some of our personnel have limited educational resources or professional exposure, meaning, does this staff member know how to talk to someone from the public defense office? Has this staff member been prosecuted by that city prosecutor before? Because remember, I told you we hire folks that have lived experience. That we have staff that have been prosecuted by the prosecutor, gone through the court program with the judge that now they're partnering with, and we still have folks that are sometimes justice involved. And so there's like conflicts of interest in navigating all of these unique, now pre-existing dynamics from a personnel perspective. And then again, we're also in the context of housing and resource scarcity in our community, so we're trying to stabilize folks and work towards these goals. And we're still existing in the same jurisdictional context and housing crisis. So I put this together, it made me chuckle. This is what happened to us. Our little trifecta turned into who is that, who is this, who's talking to who got the text message from who, what's the agenda, where did that person go? And we're talking about everyone from housing providers, street outreach organizations, other shelters, healthcare, mental health care, behavioral health care, civic advocacy groups, city prosecution, public defense, circuit court, muni court, Laurel Hill mental health care providers turned our trifecta into a quad. And that all happened in about a year and a half period, and it became really real to us in about 6 months that we needed to now know how to navigate and talk about all these different landscapes and create a whole new set of trainings specifically for that site, train staff to specifically how to navigate and understand these different relationships that we have with these key community members and municipal agencies. So your network's gonna get really broad if you explore something like this. And I have a couple recommendations. If you explore this program model, identify access to essential resources related to their case plans. Figure out a way to get phones. If you negotiate that contract, phones. If you negotiate that contract, transportation and fuel. If you don't have behavioral health resources, partner with someone who's going to be willing to come out and support you if behavioral health resources are needed. That doesn't necessarily have to be in an on-call capacity, but they should be in your network and accessible. Build institutional trust with justice-involved households. Train staff on institutional trauma awareness. Increase awareness of complex traumas associated with the criminal justice system. And you've got to talk about local ordinances and policy. You got to be honest with staff about what's the context, the social and political context in which individuals are navigating, and make sure that we're fluent on how to navigate all those ordinances, all those park rules, those different things that come up, and communicate those. Create really realistic program outcomes and goals. This means communicating with key stakeholders and creating attainable goals. There was some aspiration and early dialogue of, we'll get them into a hut and then they'll get housing. That is not a real or attainable goal within the scope of this program model, and it quickly shifted to shelter retention. And then you need to foster interagency relationships, communication, and understanding. I'm going to say that again. You need to foster interagency relationships, communication, and understanding. You've got to set up case conferencing. You've got to talk to people that you might not have traditionally been talking to. You have to have respect for the work they're doing in the community too if you want the professional relationship to go well. And you have to keep the focus on how do I help this participant navigate these systems and build the relationships with people in these systems. And I think as you ask that question, you have to examine your mission and your charter to make sure the organization aligns with that work. Because we have a housing, not handcuffs campaign. We promote housing as a human right. I speak very openly in the community about my disagreement with prohibited camping ordinances. And so it's very interesting when I'm in my own public advocacy perspective and I'm saying these ordinances violate human rights, I disagree with them, we shouldn't be doing them. And then I work with folks who are in charge of enforcing those ordinances and are involved with participants that I don't think should have to be navigating those ordinances. That's been complex as a person. And for our team, we have to learn how to navigate that and recognize that we're building partnerships with what some might perceive to be imperfect allies in the goal to help folks navigate the systems that they're administrating and operating. And by doing that, we're helping folks. Mm-hmm. Blake. Mm-hmm.
Love to hear them speak before we leave here.
Yeah, it is. Yes. So we have a activity that's coming right now, actually, and it's scheduled for the last 15 minutes of our presentation, and that's why I invited these folks to be here. So if you're in the audience and you're asking yourself, what can my organization do? This is the part of our presentation where I'm going to challenge you all to ask that question. So if you're looking and you're saying, this sounds really interesting, I'd love to learn more about this model, and I want to think about how I do this in my community, we have 3 questions that I want you all to ask and speak with your group. So we're going to get in groups of 3 to 5. We have the opportunity to answer these questions below, and then we're going to hold some space to share with the group in about the last 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll take the next 5 to 7 minutes to communicate as a group. Myself, Heather, and Danny will be walking around, connecting with you all, and then we'll be available to share as a group more broadly. So, okay.
Turntables.
Mm-hmm.
Get together. Group it.
Okay, y'all. We have about three or so minutes. Do we have any groups who have identified network or agency partnerships that might be interesting in your community that you'd like to share more broadly in the group? That's okay. Yeah, good, good. So let's bring the conversation across all of our tables. Did anyone have any networks, partnerships, or um, people that you think your agency or organization should be talking to that you're not talking to? Yeah, and we'll just talk amongst the group. Yeah.
I'm the deflection coordinator for Jackson County, and your community court, we have something similar called outreach court. I don't know if it's exactly the same thing, but it sounds very similar. And I've attended it a few times just to, I'm brand new in this position. Um, and I literally was just thinking we could offer like deflection as an option. The way they do it in Jackson County, they're open Wednesday time frame, and people who have warrants or charges that fines that they can't, they're trying to get things put back together, will come in and they will make, and it's only through their municipal court, they will make arrangements with them, like a plan for 30 days. And if you do these things in 30 days, which is generally, go look for a job, find a job, show proof of a job, show proof that you applied for jobs, um, whatever your struggles are, that's what your plan will look like. And then come back in 30 days and show us proof you did that, and we will write off 25% of your fines. And then do that again in 30 days, and we'll write off 25% of your fines until it's gone. And so I'm wondering if a deflection program could be part of that. Like, part of your plan in 30 days is to go through the deflection program.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Yeah.
It depends on what their plan is. Like, it was whatever, if that's one of the questions they ask is if they are houseless, and then they will set them up with the sheltering opportunities that we have in Jackson County, or whatever their needs are, right? Like, if they don't have their children and they're trying to get their children back, like, then what do they need to do? So it's like whatever their 30-day plan is whatever their specific needs are, and then in the next 30 days, if they've gotten a job and come in and shown you your tech stuff, okay, so we'll take that off your list. Now, what do you need transportation? What can we do to get you transportation? Yeah, every 30 days.
Mm, that's great. Awesome. Any other groups?
Yeah, I also work in Washington County as a housing case manager, and I have very similar opinions to you. I think it's really wonderful. I don't think I've ever had a client have like an open crisis without them doing housing, like based on what I consider. But I do see clients that have lost different
It looks like we're at time. Okay, y'all. Well, thank you so much for the dialogue and for being here. If you got any questions, we've got materials up front. So appreciate y'all.